You like to think you know who you are. You believe that if you were placed in a room and told to hurt someone, you would refuse. You believe that if you saw a stranger collapse on the street, you would stop and help. You believe your choices come from somewhere deep and stable inside you. But the real answer is far stranger. Your sense of self is far more fragile than you think. And in the right room, wearing the right uniform, given the right instructions, you would likely become someone you do not recognize. This is not a guess. It is one of the most repeated findings in psychology. In August 1971, a psychologist named Philip Zimbardo turned the basement of Stanford University into a fake prison. He recruited 24 college students, ordinary young men, screened for good mental health, no history of violence, nothing unusual. He split them randomly into two groups, guards and prisoners. Nothing separated these two groups except a coin flip. The plan was for the experiment to run 2 weeks. It was shut down after 6 days. Within 24 hours, the guards began humiliating the prisoners. By day 2, prisoners were staging a rebellion. By day 3, guards were forcing prisoners to do push-ups, stripping them of blankets, waking them at night for pointless roll calls. One guard, whose students later nicknamed John Wayne, began inventing psychological punishments that had not even been part of the instructions. A prisoner had a breakdown so severe he had to be released early. And Zimbardo himself, who was supposed to be observing the experiment from a distance, admitted he became so absorbed in his role as prison superintendent that he nearly let it spiral further out of control. None of these young men were violent people. Nothing in their background predicted this. So what changed? The room changed them. The role changed them. The situation, not their character, was driving the behavior. That is the part that should unsettle you. Your identity, the thing you feel most certain of, can bend to a uniform and a set of rules faster than you would ever expect. You are not imagining a wild exception here. This finding shows up again and again. A decade earlier, at Yale, a psychologist named Stanley Milgram ran a different kind of test. He told participants they were helping with a memory experiment. Their job was to deliver an electric shock every time a learner answered a question incorrectly. The shocks increased in intensity with each wrong answer, all the way up to a label reading 450 volts. Danger. Severe shock. The learner was an actor. No one was actually being shocked. But the participants did not know that. They heard what sounded like real screams, real pleading, real silence. Milgram had predicted that only a tiny fraction of people, maybe 1 in 1,000, would go all the way to the highest voltage. Psychiatrists he consulted guessed even lower. But when the results came in, roughly 65% of participants delivered the maximum shock. Not because they were cruel, because a man in a lab coat standing calmly beside them said the words, "The experiment requires that you continue." 65%. Ordinary people. Office workers, teachers, engineers, all of them capable of walking further than they ever imagined, simply because someone in a position of authority told them it was fine to keep going. Here is the deeper unease sitting underneath both of these studies. You assume your morality is a fixed compass, always pointing the same direction no matter where you stand. But morality behaves more like a compass near a magnet. Authority bends it, uniforms bend it, group pressure bends it. And most people never notice the bending because in the moment, it does not feel like losing control. It feels like following the obvious next step. There is a third piece to this puzzle, and it might be the strangest one. In 1964, a young woman named Kitty Genovese was murdered outside her apartment in New York. Newspapers reported that dozens of witnesses heard her cries and did nothing. The story, though later shown to be exaggerated, sparked two psychologists, John Darley and Bib Latane, to ask a haunting question. Why do people freeze when someone needs help? Their answer became known as the bystander effect, and the twist is almost the opposite of what you would expect. The more people who witness an emergency, the less likely any single person is to step in. Not because people are heartless, because responsibility spreads thin across a crowd. Each person assumes someone else will act. Darley and Latane called it diffusion of responsibility, and they proved it in controlled experiments. When a person believed they were the only witness to someone in distress, they helped almost every time. When they believed several other people could also hear it, helping rates dropped sharply. You are not less caring in a crowd. You are less certain that the responsibility is yours. Put these three findings together and a pattern emerges that goes far beyond a psychology textbook. Zimbardo shows you that a role can override your character. Milgram shows you that authority can override your conscience. Darley and Latani show you that a crowd can override your instinct to act. None of these forces announce themselves. None of them feel like manipulation while they are happening. They feel like context. They feel like normal life. So why does your brain work this way? Why would evolution build a mind this easy to steer? For most of human history, you did not survive alone. You survived inside a small group, dependent on cooperation, hierarchy, and shared rules. A brain that constantly questioned the group's authority, constantly demanded independent proof before following a leader, constantly refused to defer, would have been a liability. Groups that hesitated during a hunt or a threat did not last. Groups that moved together, trusted their leaders quickly, and split responsibility across many hands survived more often. Obedience was not a flaw in early humans. It was often the safer bet. That instinct never left you. It just changed rooms. Instead of a tribal elder, it is a manager, a teacher, a man in a lab coat, a uniformed guard. Instead of a hunting party, it is a crowded sidewalk, a group chat, a comment section. The wiring is ancient. The situations wearing it down are brand new. Think about how often this plays out in your own life, quietly, without any lab coats involved. You go along with a decision at work you privately disagree with because everyone else in the room seems fine with it. You watch a video of someone in trouble online, assume someone else will call for help, and keep scrolling. You follow a rule you find pointless, simply because it is the rule, and questioning it feels harder than complying. None of these moments feel dramatic. They rarely feel like a loss of control. But they are the same mechanisms Zimbardo, Milgram, and Darley uncovered, just wearing a much quieter disguise. This does not mean you are helpless against it. Awareness changes the equation. Milgram found that when participants saw someone else refuse to continue the shocks, their own willingness to comply dropped sharply. One dissenting voice was enough to break the spell. Darley and Latané found that simply naming the phenomenon, teaching people about diffusion of responsibility, made bystanders significantly more likely to intervene the next time. The moment your brain can name what is happening to it, the automatic script starts to lose its grip. So the next time you feel completely certain of what you would do in a difficult moment, hold that certainty loosely. Not because you are weak, because you are human, and humans are built to bend toward the room they are standing in. You like to think you know who you are, but who you are has always depended, more than you realized, on where you are standing, who is standing beside you, and who is telling you what to do next.